We live in a world obsessed with results, metrics, outcomes, applause. From the outside, we're conditioned to chase the end, the transformation, the glow-up, the breakthrough moment. But what if I told you that rebuilding yourself doesn't start with action? It starts with meaning. Not with what you do, but with why you do it. Because the truth is, you don't change your habits just because someone tells you they're bad. You don't wake up one day and decide to rewrite your entire lifestyle because of guilt, pressure, or motivation. Those things are weak. They fade. You rebuild, truly rebuild, only when your reason is stronger than your resistance. We all have weak habits. Maybe you hit snooze a dozen times every morning. Maybe you open your phone before you open your eyes. Maybe you keep saying tomorrow to the thing you were supposed to start last year, and you hate that about yourself. You feel stuck in cycles. You keep saying, this isn't me, and still nothing changes. Why? Because the desire to change is not the same as the will to change. There's something deep inside every one of us that longs for more, to be better, to be stronger, to walk taller. That longing is not just ambition, it's identity trying to emerge. But it's often buried under excuses, distractions, and weak habits that numb us to our purpose. And here's where most people get it wrong. They think breaking bad habits is about discipline. It's not. It's about clarity. Clarity of who you want to be. Clarity of what you stand for. Clarity of what you refuse to tolerate anymore. That kind of clarity is more powerful than motivation. Because when you're clear on why you must change, the how starts to find you. Not overnight, not easily, but it finds you. Let me ask you this. If I took away every distraction, every coping mechanism, every numbing behavior you have, what would be left? Could you sit with yourself? Could you face the version of you that's been buried beneath convenience and comfort? Most people can't. So they run. Not physically, emotionally. They run into distractions, temporary pleasures, and hollow validations. All of it is noise. And so they come home to the vacuum that hides away the noise, and the vacuum that hides away the suffering, and the vacuum that all of it is armor. And none of it will help you rebuild who you are. Now imagine you didn't run. Imagine you stopped, looked at your life, and asked yourself, not what should I fix, but what do I stand for? That's the beginning. That's the real foundation. We rebuild ourselves not by chasing a perfect version of who we want to be, but by committing to a meaningful one. You don't need to be flawless. You need to be clear. That's what purpose does. It gives your pain a reason. It gives your discomfort a destination. It tells your brain this effort matters. This sacrifice is not wasted. And here's the most liberating truth I've learned. People don't fail because they're weak. They fail because their why is weak. If your why is rooted in shame, comparison, or pressure, it won't carry you far. But if your why is anchored in truth, in becoming someone you admire, in honoring who you were meant to be, you will outlast your bad habits. That kind of change doesn't need a Monday. It doesn't need a resolution. It needs a decision to start asking better questions. Not what's wrong with me, not why can't I be consistent, but what matters enough that I would never quit on it. Because when you find that, you stop needing constant motivation. You don't need someone to cheer you on every day. You don't need 100 productivity hacks. You have something deeper. You have meaning. The world will always give you a list of things to fix. Eat better, sleep more, read this, wake up at 5 a.m., and maybe those things help, but they are secondary. Until you know why you're rebuilding, every effort will feel like punishment. Every setback will feel like proof that you can't do it. But when your why is clear, even failure becomes fuel. You start to see your bad habits for what they are. Not flaws, but signals, clues pointing to a misalignment. You overeat, not because you're lazy, but because you're unfulfilled. You procrastinate, not because you're undisciplined, but because you don't see the point of the task in front of you. That's not a productivity problem, that's a purpose problem. And here's what's powerful. You can change that right now. You don't need to be perfect. You need to be anchored. Anchored in your values, anchored in your potential, anchored in a vision of yourself that refuses to settle. When you build from that place, not fear, not shame, but purpose, that's what rebuilding is. It's not just quitting weak habits. It's becoming someone who would never allow them to stick around. So stop obsessing over the habit, start obsessing over the identity. The stronger your why, the fewer excuses you make. The stronger your why, the more resilient you become. The stronger your why, the more you will fight to show up, not because you have to, but because it would feel wrong not to. Rebuilding yourself is not about fixing a broken version of you. It's about releasing the version of you that's been waiting to take over. And that starts always with knowing why it matters. We often talk about habits as if they're harmless routines, things we can tweak when life gets quieter, or when motivation magically appears. But the truth is far less innocent. Weak habits aren't just bad decisions you repeat. They're subtle, consistent, and dangerously comfortable patterns that rob you of who you could be. Most of us don't notice them because they don't scream. They whisper. They don't show up with chaos. They show up with convenience. A weak habit doesn't look like destruction. It looks like delay. Like scrolling through your phone when you promise to read. Like saying just 5 more minutes when you know it turns into hours. Like skipping the gym not because you're injured, but because it's raining and you don't feel like it. No big deal, right? That's the trick. Weak habits rarely feel catastrophic in the moment. That's why we don't fight them. That's why we justify them. They don't ruin your life in one day. They quietly steal your edge. And you don't realize the damage until you look back and wonder where your time, your energy, your drive went. That's what makes them so dangerous. They're the slow erosion of your standards. They don't break your life, they bend it gradually until you don't recognize the person in the mirror. It's not the obvious mistakes that hold people back, it's the patterns we've normalized. The ones that fit so easily into our days that we don't question them anymore. And the reason they survive is because they come with a payoff, even if it's short-lived. Procrastination rewards you with temporary comfort. Overeating numbs your emotions. Saying yes to everything makes you feel needed. But underneath all of it is a cost you pay with your potential. You have to understand something. Your weak habits are not random, they are responses. They're how you cope, they're how you avoid, they're how you maintain control when something inside feels uncertain. That's why breaking them is so hard. You're not just changing behavior, you're changing a belief system. And yet if you want to rebuild yourself, if you want to become the kind of person you admire, you must be willing to look at these habits not as inconveniences, but as enemies. Not because they're evil, but because they are in direct opposition to your growth. The version of you who thrives, who leads, who contributes at the highest level, that version cannot coexist with weak habits. You cannot rise and stay attached to what's been weighing you down. And no, this isn't about being perfect, it's about being honest. Because there's a moment in every person's life when they have to choose between what's easy and what's right. between what feels good now and what builds something better later. And that moment isn't dramatic. It's ordinary. It shows up every morning when your alarm goes off. It shows up every time you reach for your phone instead of your purpose. Every time you justify why today isn't the day to begin. So how do you fight weak habits? You start by identifying them. You name them. Ask yourself, what are the quiet choices I make every day that are slowly shaping a life I don't want? That's not a rhetorical question. It's a mirror. And you might not like the answer. That's okay. Growth rarely feels good in the beginning. It often starts with discomfort, even disappointment in yourself. But that's not a reason to stop. It's the very reason to continue. Here's the irony. Weak habits make you feel safe. They make you feel in control, but they're actually making you more reactive, more impulsive, more disconnected from the life you say you want. Every time you feed them, they grow stronger. Every time you surrender to them, you teach yourself that your goals don't matter. And the scariest part, you start to believe it. You start to tell yourself stories like, maybe I'm just not that disciplined, or maybe this is just who I am. But deep down, you know better. You feel it. You were meant for more. And you don't need another motivational quote to confirm it. You need to fight. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly, consistently, and with conviction. That's the real battle. Not against the world, but against the version of you that settles. Your weak habits will never stop asking for your attention, but you can stop giving them your permission. And every time you do, you reclaim a piece of your strength. You want confidence? Kill the habits that make you feel weak. You want discipline? Starve the behaviors that give you easy escape. You want progress? Remove the patterns that keep you circling the same frustrations. And here's the final truth. No one's coming to rescue you from your habits. Not your friends, not your coach, not your timeline. It's you versus your patterns. And the only way you win is by deciding every single day that you will not be a prisoner of your past decisions. You were not built to be average. You were not made to coast, and you were certainly not born to be ruled by habits that dishonor your potential. But you must act like it. And that starts by paying attention, not to the dramatic moments, but to the quiet ones, the seconds, the thoughts, the choices that seem small but shape everything. Your greatness is not something you find at the end of a long journey. It's something you reveal, one broken habit at a time. There's something deeply uncomfortable about letting go, something almost unnatural. We're wired to protect what we've built, to hold on, to preserve. And yet, when it comes to growth, real, lasting growth, there is one truth we cannot ignore. You cannot build the life you want on top of habits that are quietly destroying you. You have to tear down before you build up. Most people want change to be clean, elegant, and inspiring. They want transformation to look like a beautiful montage, quick cuts, powerful music, and a finish line in sight. But that's fantasy. Real change is messy. It's hard. It's inconvenient because it often begins with demolition. And not everyone has the courage to tear down what's familiar. That's why most people don't truly rebuild. They repaint, they redecorate, they cover up the cracks instead of fixing the foundation. They don't kill the weak habits, they camouflage them. They rename procrastination as rest, avoidance as self-care, and complacency as acceptance. But you cannot fake growth. Sooner or later, the walls will shake and the cracks will show. You have to go deeper. You have to be willing to take a hard look at what you've built your life on, the beliefs, the behaviors, the routines, and ask yourself, does this support the person I want to become? And if the answer is no, then you must do what most people are too afraid to do. You must destroy it. Not because you're broken, but because the old structure can't support what's next. This is what most people miss. Destruction isn't negative, it's essential. Think about it. When a building is too damaged to be restored, you don't keep adding new floors. You tear it down. You clear the space. You make room for something better, stronger, more aligned with the vision. The same principle applies to you. Weak habits cannot be negotiated with. You cannot reason with self-sabotage. You can't ease out of the behaviors that are holding you back. At some point, you have to draw a line and say, this ends here. You have to break up with the version of you that keeps choosing comfort over character. It always is. There is grief in letting go of the habits that have been with you for years, even if they've been hurting you. There's something oddly comforting about dysfunction when it's familiar. It gives you something to lean on, even if it's slowly wearing you down. But here's the truth. Your new life will cost you your old one. There's no way around it. You can't become the person you're meant to be while still clinging to the habits that shape the person you no longer want to be. You have to let go. You have to look discomfort in the eye and say, you're coming with me. Because there is no comfort in growth, and there is no growth in comfort. What looks like destruction from the outside is often just the clearing of space for something better. And that's what rebuilding really is. It's a process of choosing. Choosing what stays and what goes. Choosing what you will no longer tolerate from yourself. Choosing who you're becoming over who you've been. That's not a one-time decision, it's a daily one. It happens every time you want to skip the hard thing. Every time you reach for an old habit to feel safe. Every time you want to slip back into who you used to be. Because that version of you didn't have to work so hard. Rebuilding requires honesty. You can't lie to yourself and still expect transformation. You have to tell the truth about your patterns, about your excuses, about the stories you tell yourself to stay small. That's not easy, but it is necessary. And here's something else. The people around you might not understand. They might think you're being too intense, too disciplined, too committed. That's okay. Growth often looks like rebellion to people still loyal to their comfort zones. But this isn't about them. It's about you, your future, your potential, your legacy. The question is not, is this hard? The question is this worth it? Because you already know the answer to that. You felt the cost of staying the same. You felt the weight of pretending you're fine when you're not. You felt the frustration of promising yourself change and watching nothing happen. So don't run from the hard part. Lean into it. Be willing to tear down what no longer serves you. Be willing to sit in the rubble and say, this is where I rebuild. And when you do, you'll find something remarkable happens. The same energy you once used to maintain your weak habits becomes the energy you use to create new ones. The same time you once spent avoiding discomfort becomes time spent building strength. The same patterns that once distracted you become replaced with systems that elevate you. Destruction makes space for discipline. That's how you rebuild. Not with grand declarations, not with perfect plans, but with a quiet, steady decision to stop letting your past dictate your future, to stop entertaining what makes you weak, and to finally fully step into what makes you strong. It won't be perfect. You'll stumble, You'll feel resistance, you'll want to turn back, but every time you choose to continue, every time you choose to destroy a little more of what doesn't serve you, you're reinforcing the new foundation. A foundation of integrity, a foundation of discipline, a foundation of purpose. And from that place, you don't just rebuild, you rise. We all know what it feels like to try and stop a bad habit. You tell yourself, that's it, no more. You make the commitment. You feel strong in the moment. And maybe it even works for a day, maybe two. But then the pattern pulls you back. The habit returns, and suddenly you're right back where you started. Frustrated, disappointed, wondering what's wrong with you. The real problem is that most people try to eliminate weak habits without installing anything stronger in their place. They try to stop without building. They focus on subtraction, not replacement. And that's why it never lasts. You cannot rebuild yourself by simply removing what doesn't, because nature doesn't tolerate a vacuum. If you remove something, but you don't replace it, something else will fill the gap. Usually the same old behavior that you thought you left behind. This is why willpower alone fails, because willpower is a finite resource. It fades. It depletes. You can't rely on sheer effort to fight your old patterns forever. Eventually, your brain will look for the easiest route, and unless you've laid down a new path, unless you've trained yourself to turn towards something stronger, you will default to the familiar. This isn't about being more disciplined. It's about being more strategic. You need a structure that supports the version of you that you're trying to become. Not just a list of things to avoid, but a system of things to do instead. You don't quit sleeping in late. You start waking up with purpose. You don't just stop scrolling for hours. You start creating something meaningful in that time. You don't just stop eating junk food. You start fueling your body like it matters, because it does matter. Every action you take is a vote for the person you're becoming. And if you're only casting votes against your old self, but not casting any for your new self, you're standing still. And the illusion of progress is the most dangerous thing of all. It convinces you that you're doing something when really you're stuck in the same cycle. The key is replacement, not removal. So, what does that actually look like? It looks like identifying your weak habits and asking yourself, what is this giving me? What's the payoff? Because even the habits that hurt you are trying to give you something. Relief, distraction, pleasure, a sense of control. And unless you meet that need with something stronger, you will never stop going back. You have to outsmart your habit, not just outrun it. If your habit gives you comfort, replace it with something that gives you strength. If your habit gives you escape, replace it with something that gives you clarity. If your habit gives you stimulation, replace it with something that gives you momentum. And the replacement has to be something you respect. Something that aligns with your identity, not just your goals. Because goals can change. But identity is deeper. Identity shapes behavior. When you say, I'm trying to stop procrastinating, you're still identifying with the problem. But when you say, I'm someone who takes action when it matters, you're aligning with the solution. You're shifting the story. And that shift, over time, becomes more powerful than motivation. This isn't just about tactics. It's about belief. Belief in the idea that you can be someone different, someone stronger, someone intentional. And belief is not something you wait for. It's something you build with repetition, with structure, with systems that make the right thing easier, not harder. So many people are exhausted, not because they're broken, but because they've been trying to rebuild their lives on willpower alone. That's like trying to build a house with only your bare hands. You need tools, you need blueprints, you need something solid to stand on. That's what strong habits are. They're not glamorous. They're not loud. They're the quiet rituals that carry you forward when your emotions try to hold you back. They're the default behaviors that work in your favor, even on your worst day. Think about that. What if your worst day still moved you forward, even just a little? That's what happens when you replace weak habits with strong ones. You stop living by how you feel. You start living by what you've built. You don't have to feel motivated to follow a system. You just have to trust it. And trust comes from design. Designing your life around your values, not just your moods. Start small. Replace the snooze button with a 2-minute walk. Replace 30 minutes of scrolling with 10 minutes of journaling. Replace negative self-talk with one clear spoken affirmation. Not because it's magical, but because it's movement. And movement matters more than intensity. We often wait for the perfect plan, the perfect moment. But the truth is, rebuilding your life doesn't start with a dramatic change. It starts with a consistent one. It's easy to focus on what you want to stop. It's harder, but far more effective to focus on what you want to start. Because what you start becomes who you are, and who you are becomes what you do, even without thinking. That's the goal, not perfection, not control, but a foundation of habits so strong that they make your old ones irrelevant. That's how you kill a weak habit. You starve it, you replace it, you bury it under something better. Not just once, but every day. Because rebuilding isn't about one big moment of change. It's about the small shifts, repeated with intention, until they become your new default. And when that happens, you're no longer resisting the old you. You're living as the new you. There comes a moment when you realize that transformation isn't a moment at all, it's a process. A process that takes more than motivation, more than promises, more than passion. It takes relentless consistency. That's the final piece. It's not enough to start, you have to keep going. Because everything you're trying to become only becomes real through repetition. If we just get fired up enough, everything will change. That one powerful decision will flip the switch. That one breakthrough will rewrite the story. And yes, beginnings matter, but beginnings without consistency are just moments of inspiration that fade into memory. Change doesn't come from what you do once. It comes from what you do daily. You want to rebuild yourself? Then consistency is the muscle you must train again and again, even when motivation disappears. Especially when it disappears. Because that's when the real shift happens. When you keep showing up, not because it feels good, but because it's who you've decided to be. And it's important to understand this. Consistency doesn't mean doing everything perfectly every time. It means doing the right thing more often than not. It means returning to the work, returning to the process, returning to the hard thing, even after setbacks, even after slip-ups, even after you lose your way. Too many people quit because they confuse imperfection with failure. But the real failure is stopping. The real failure is convincing yourself that if you can't do it flawlessly, it's not worth doing at all. That belief has killed more dreams than any mistake ever will. You don't need to be perfect, you need to be persistent. Because consistency compounds. Just like weak habits slowly destroy your edge, strong habits slowly build your momentum. They're rarely dramatic, in fact, they're often invisible, but over time they shape your identity. They rewire your brain. They build trust with yourself. The kind of trust that says, I keep the promises I make even when no one is watching. And that's what matters most. Not what people see, but what you do when they don't. When no one is clapping for you. when no one is asking how it's going, when no one is holding you accountable except you. That's the moment that determines whether you're really rebuilding or just rehearsing. And make no mistake, consistency is hard because it's boring. It's not exciting like breakthroughs or dramatic decisions. It's early mornings. It's showing up tired. It's doing the work when it's no longer new. It's saying no to what's easy so you can say yes to what matters. And most people aren't wired for that. Most people crave novelty more than progress. But here's the good news. You don't have to be most people. You can decide right now that your standard is higher, that your word means something, that your actions will align with your values, not occasionally, not when it's convenient, but consistently. Because here's what consistency really is. It's proof of belief. You can say you want to change. You can say you're tired of your weak habits. But if your behavior doesn't follow through, then what you're really saying is, I want change, but not enough to earn it. And change has a cost. That cost is repetition. That cost is showing up after the initial motivation fades. That cost is choosing the same difficult, necessary action again and again until it becomes who you are. Think about that. Every single time you choose the better habit, the stronger habit, you are not just doing the thing, you are becoming the person. One rep at a time. One choice at a time. That's what rebuilding is. It's not an explosion. It's not a dramatic before and after moment. It's slow, it's quiet, it's thankless, but it's real. And when you look back months from now, maybe years from now, and people say, wow, how did you do it? You'll know the truth. It wasn't some secret formula. It was consistency. It was refusing to quit. It was refusing to let your weak habits win. It was being faithful to the future version of you, even when the current one wanted to check out. And if you ever lose your way, because you will, the answer is not to beat yourself up. The answer is to return. Return to the process. Return to the habit. Return to the promise. That's the beauty of consistency. It doesn't demand perfection. It just asks for your return. And the more you return, the stronger you become. Because consistency isn't just about doing, it's about becoming. The actions you take over and over again begin to reshape your identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who's trying and start seeing yourself as someone who simply does. And that identity change is everything. When you believe you're the kind of person who shows up, you'll keep showing up. When you believe you're the kind of person who finishes, you'll find a way to. When you believe you're the kind of person who values discipline more than comfort, you'll stop chasing ease. And over time, those beliefs become unshakable. Because they're not just ideas, they're earned through action, through repetition, through consistency. So if you're asking, how do I truly rebuild myself? This is the answer. You do the work even when you don't feel like it. You show up even when no one's watching. You repeat the right behavior even when results are invisible. Because consistency is the long game. It's the unglamorous path that leads to unshakable strength. And in a world full of people looking for shortcuts, you become powerful by doing what they won't. By committing not once, but every day. That's the moment the rebuild becomes real. Not when you start, but when you decide again and again to never stop.